Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for Women Making an Impact in Sports. My name is Michelle Rapp. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Career Strategy in the Office of Alumni Relations. I'm so excited to have such an interesting and accomplished alumni panel here today, representing diverse perspectives and experience in the sports industry. And I appreciate all of them taking their time to be with us and share their knowledge and experiences. Our panelists are Patty Bofolka, Vice President of Communications at the Women's Sports Foundation, Katie Haas, CEO of the Western and Southern Open, Kate Madigan, Assistant General Manager of the New Jersey Devils, and Annabelle Padilla, Director of Player Engagement at the Brooklyn Nets. And our moderator is Dr. Pam Wojnar, Associate Professor in the Master in Sports Leadership Program at Northeastern. I'm going to turn it over to Pam.
Hi, welcome everybody. I'm so glad people could make it today. I'm big into networking and I'm big into connecting with people. So I'm going to lead with, if you are able to turn on your camera, I personally highly recommend doing that. And then our panelists can put names with faces. And when you try to connect with them later, they'll be like, oh yeah, that was that one with the cool background or the great pillows behind them or whatever. It's a great way for people to remember each other. So, oh, see, Christine, people will say, oh my God, that was the one who did it with her baby and had her baby there the whole time. So it's a great way for networking and to connect with people. So highly recommend. But I'd like to just dive in right away and ask each of the panelists, what is a hot button topic or significant project you're working on the job right now? Well, let's just start with Annabelle, just because you're the first one I see.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Wow, you came with a good question right at the beginning.
Right off the start. And you can share a little bit about yourself more if you want to before you start.
Yeah, sure. So as she mentioned, Director of Player Engagement with the Brooklyn Nets. I'm entering my 5th season with the team. So while I am in the basketball operations department, which traditionally is everything on court with the players, everything from building a team to maintaining the health, safety of the guys day to day, and obviously ultimately winning. I do serve in that department, but more overseeing all of the off-court operations for our players. So everything from onboarding, transitioning their entire lives to a new market, and just being a support system for them and their families and their network all the way through, helping with a lot of personal, professional development aspects. And I also work very closely with our business team. So ticketing, sponsorship, marketing, as much as it is a sport, it is a business, and our guys are contractually obligated to participate in events and asks that support our business. So I'm at the middle of that. I guess not so much a hot button, but just really what's going on right now. We are day 4 of training camp. And so it's definitely an exciting time. A lot comes at once because it's a 20 player roster right now. We have to get it down to 17. Guys are, transitioning into Brooklyn. And so in my job and sort of making the first impression of our team, our market, it's definitely a really busy time of year, but it's exciting. It's a start of season for everyone, and there's definitely high expectations for us. So on my end, that's definitely the big thing, is managing and keeping a level of excitement from day one.
Awesome, thank you. Katie?
Yeah, real quick, I am Katie Haas, the CEO of the Western Southern Open. For those of you who may have been like me 4 years ago, had never even heard of the Western and Southern Open when I left Boston Red Sox. It is an ATP WTA combined event. We are one of 5 events in the world that it is not a Grand Slam tennis event where the men and women play on the same courts over the course of the week. As of 9:15 this morning, we just sold our tournament. We used to be owned by the USTA, that also is responsible for hosting and running the US Open. And we have just sold to a Charleston billionaire for $200 million. So that's what I have been working on the last 8 months, along with leading our tournament here in Cincinnati, Ohio. So it'll feel good to get one thing off of my plate come Monday. So I am very happy to be here as well.
Great. Wow, you must have sigh of relief that that's done.
Definitely.
Kate.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Kate Madigan, Assistant General Manager for the New Jersey Devils, the hockey team. I know you've probably a lot of Bruins fans on here, but that's okay. I do a little bit of everything. So right hand with the general manager, kind of in his leadership executive group. So anything from trades to free agents, roster decisions, culture setting, the draft, anything. I travel with the team full time, so any logistical problems come up, being in that as well. Recently, we had the draft and free agency in July was big, and then we're planning for our season right now, as well as Annabelle, we're in training camp. We're probably 10 days in. Our roster's at 56 right now, and we have to get down to 23. So we're going through this week cuts with the coaches and trying to really narrow down that team. We've had some preseason games. So the last week we've had 4 games in 5 days. So it's been pretty busy, managing injuries, all of that. So kind of have my fingers in a little bit of everything.
Great. And Patty.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here today. I'm Patty Bofolka. I'm the Vice President of Communications at the Women's Sports Foundation. So we're a nonprofit foundation that was started by Billie Jean King in 1974. And we're an ally and advocate and a catalyst for girls and women in sports. Our mission is, we exist to enable girls and women to reach their potential in sport and life. Sports is a great communicator and an avenue to learn and grow. I oversee all of our communication strategies, our digital, our social, as well as, our communications plans around our signature events, and also programming and funding, et cetera. So a lot of, great opportunity and great fun. And to your point, Pam, on what working on right now, 2 things come to mind. Our whole year has been very focused since this year is the 50th anniversary of Title IX, the preeminent law that opened up the doors for girls and women in sports. We've woven that thematic throughout our programming, throughout the year, our events, our programs, et cetera. And more imminently is our annual Salute to Women in Sports, which is our annual biggest fundraiser, which is the biggest night in women's sports, is coming up October 12th. So Katie, congratulations on the exhale. I'm looking forward to October 13th, but October 12th is always a labor of love and really exciting that we usually have about 50 to 60 women athletes from across sports, from across the country joining us. And it's always an exciting evening and a wonderful time to bring everybody together to celebrate the year that was, but to also advocate for, the need for continued access and opportunity and resources for girls and women in sports. So great to be here today.
I'm going to dovetail right off of what you just finished talking about and ask you, Patty, what's the impact of Title IX and how do the lessons learned in sports translate to the boardroom, all that, especially with it being Title IX's 50th year, which, since I teach that class, I have to add that to make sure everybody knows, Title IX did not start out as a law for athletics. It started out from faculty, but has become known as the law for sports, I guess you could say. Would you agree?
Yeah, Pam, that's a good point. Everybody, it's considered the preeminent law that helped, pave the way or open the doors for more, sport participation for girls and women's sports. And it's done tremendous work and there's been, great progress. We've certainly seen, like today, the participation for girls in sport is 12 times higher, than what it was in 1972. But yet in aggregate numbers, some of our research, the foundation, we issued a report this past May, Title IX at 50, we're not done yet. And that's part of our messaging of like, it's been great, but there's still more work to be done. So some of the things to your point, Pam, what's so exciting in sports, as a lot of people here know, it's a great communicator, it's a great unifier, but it's also a great platform to learn. Besides the mastery of the skill of the sport, it's all of those ancillary benefits, right? The teamwork, the camaraderie, the sense of self, the learning, the leadership skills, all of those things that come from that experience, that can come from that experience of sport. That's why we as a foundation want to make sure that girls and women have the same equal opportunities as boys and men, because sports, kind of grew up more in that camp than ours. But it's interesting, Pam, to your point of how it translates to the boardroom. I know that we've seen, like, in our data, I think it's 94% of women in the C-suite played sports, 52% at the collegiate level. But the net is that a lot of people who are in leadership roles learn some of that leadership on the field, in the pool, on the court, type of thing. So certainly that's where we as a foundation have come out saying, hey, we want everybody to have the opportunity to play so that everybody, reaps the benefits of, and we see, how that's such a great foundation for the workforce as well, all the things that you learn there.
I'm going to try to intersperse questions from the audience, as well as, other questions that I've come up with or we've come up with. And so, like I said, I put it in the chat. If you have any questions at any time, please write them in the chat, because this is for you, and we definitely want to get your questions answered. There's a question. Athletics are very important to me. I played volleyball, soccer, and basketball, grade school through high school, and I'm interested in continuing in NE. I'm guessing that's in Northeastern. Could you tell me a little bit about those worlds and what the schedule is like if there are tryouts you need to be approved? Anybody who played in, I could tell you I used to coach in college, and I can say that most teams do offer tryouts, because from a coach perspective, there's always that possibility of getting that diamond in the rough, and you just never know. But it's really contacting the coaches. Do any of our panelists have any insight on that as well?
I can go. I ran track at Northeastern. I was a sprinter and a hurdler, standing tall at 5'2", so pretty shocking. But I actually was a non-scholarship athlete, so I knew kind of going in, but was a walk-on in that sense. Very different. There's in high school versus college, you're lifting a lot more, 2 to 3 times a week. So you may be running or practicing. For us, it was on the track at Reggie Lewis for an hour and a half, 2 hours, doing different drills. And then it's also lifting probably an hour or 2 a day, 3 times a week. There's also different things, pool workouts, right? You have the SAS, so you got to do study hall at some degree. So there's a lot of different aspects. It is a lot, but after kind of the 6 months, you realize how to handle the schedule. For me particularly, I also wanted to do co-op, so it is difficult to do co-op and sports. It's not to say that you can't, but for me, I had to work with my coach. A typical day would be running, working out 5:45 to 7:30, getting ready for work, going to co-op 8:39 to 6 p.m., lifting 7 to 9. Then you go home and you just sleep. But it is a tough schedule when you try and take it all, but there is an opportunity for it.
And do you offer club or intramural sports where you're not actually on the team, but you have it as like a side or something? Because the other question was, how did you find the balance? Like what you just said, it sounded like so much, like I don't know how you did that all that time. So how did you find the balance to put everything into your sports and your co-op and your school?
Yeah, looking back now, it looks a lot. I don't know how I did it. I also had a part-time job. You just make it work. A lot of time management, and that's, as Patty said, I do think sports help you for the real world, for the executive levels. They do have it, and someone else can speak on this, but they do have intramurals. They have club sports, so you can still have fun and do sports without the full commitment. For me, a lot of it was just time management and making sure I prioritized what I had to make sure I got schoolwork or co-op done. I always kind of did 2 or 3 sports at once in high school, but a lot of it's just like knowing your style, kind of figuring out how to prioritize for yourself. But they do have club sports, which I know are awesome too, and the Marino Center and all of that. So there's a lot of different opportunities. If you don't want to do D1, there's club sports, there's intramurals, and they're fun. It's good just to hang out and run around with friends too.
Thank you so much.
on that with the work-life balance and everything, let's go to Annabelle. How do you manage the work-life balance now? You know, it's one thing when you're in school, but now you have other things pulling at you with the job, and between trying to climb the ladder and attain certain positions, so you don't want to feel like you don't want to say no to certain things, but if you say yes to everything, then you have no life.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, you know, it's not easy. And it's something that I think there's a self-awareness that you kind of have that you're entering this world. I don't think it should come as a surprise that it could be really intense. So I think, you know, the first thing is just the self-awareness of that. You know, you're entering into an industry which, you know, the best example I give is, because it's relevant, it's topical. I may think I'm checking out because I'm leaving the office, but I'm scrolling personally on Instagram or Twitter, and the industry is in your face, whether you want it or not. Or, you know, you're going to a family party and your uncle's cousin wants to ask about it. So it's just something that's part of the job. So I think, you know, internally, it's really having that self-discipline to figure out, you know, what your priorities are. And certainly it changes over time, but I think it's really understanding kind of where your priorities, you know, and how you want to devote them. You know, if you're younger in your career, probably it's easier to, you know, go full on and say yes to everything. Whereas right now I'm 15 years in, I have to be a little bit more strategic and think through things. But as it relates to the role, I think part of saying no is really being clear and transparent with not only yourself, but your direct manager and maybe people you work with, to understand what the role is, right? What the expectation is, things that you can do on the front end so that you can manage to that. And it's easier to say no or pivot to certain things because you've come to that understanding. Also, just kind of being a student of you know, the entire organization, and understanding what other roles and responsibilities other people or other job functions do, because you know, if something falls on your plate, you know, being able to understand it, you might be able to pivot to another department and confidently say like, well, this is great, it might fall you know, in my area because it deals with players, which is what everybody can say because everything always deals with players at the end of the day. But maybe on paper, it's something more suited for our medical team to really take the lead on. So that just comes with time and understanding. But I think first and foremost, it's really, you know, doing your own personal self-evaluation of the priorities and then managing to that, rather than the work dictating it. I think it's important that each individual dictates it themselves.
So kind of similar to what Kate was saying when you're in college, finding that balance and which is the priority. Katie, a question from one of our audience here. How do you deal with confidence issues working in a male-dominated industry?
Confidence issues. I deal personally more with imposter syndrome issues, especially being mainly usually always the only female in the room or at the table. I'm in my second position in my career where I am the only female in my position, whether it's in tennis, whether it was in Major League Baseball. So it's something that I still struggle and battle with, but it's just knowing your worth. Obviously that this is an incredible panel of very accomplished women that can point to their successes. And so I would again say, don't be like me and focus on the losses, because I don't do a good enough job focusing on the wins because I get caught up in the losses. But it's also, you can fail, but you're not a failure. So I think it's just, as long as you know your worth and you know your value and you stand up for that, because I think also too, I am a bit older than Annabelle and Kate here, but I feel as though I was brought up in a culture at a time in the job world and doing my co-ops, right? And I did not play a sport. The closest I came to a team at Northeastern was hanging out at Punter's Pub on Saturday nights. But I understand that, you know, it was just work. And I ended up with my co-op during Northeastern, I ended up going to school full-time and working full-time for my co-op employer, which was the Red Sox. So when you have, you know, these multiple week homestands and the whole thing, and I'll never forget sitting at Fenway Park after a Patriots Day game at 9 o'clock at night alone at Fenway typing up my term paper for Professor Dukakis, because that's just what you had to do, right? Because you just had to do it. And we didn't, and I didn't necessarily say, hey, look at this, I'm doing this. And I think now as I'm older, I have kids of my own, a daughter of my own, and I want to set that example for her. And I need to take my own advice of being more confident and seeing like, holy crap, look at this stuff, right? So I think women are very hard on ourselves, but I think that we have to also champion each other. I will say that I get it all the time. Someone said to me once, oh, it's so cool, you're the only woman. It's not cool at all. It's the worst thing. We have to bring each other along. We have to champion each other. We have to advocate for each other. We have to network for each other. And with all of that, we'll also come and build with that confidence. So it's a long-winded answer to the question. But bottom line at the core is to know your worth and do not, and as Annabelle said, prioritize and do not change for someone else.
Great. No, not an easy answer. To dovetail on that a little bit, Patty, how do you feel is a good way to strike that balance, kind of what Katie was alluding to with tooting your own horn, to use the vernacular that I grew up hearing, versus just, letting people know what you've done. And I think as women, we have a tendency to think we're bragging or tooting our own horn or that type of thing, when in actuality it's more of a, well, if people don't know what you've done, right, they're going to draw their own conclusions on what you are capable of doing type thing.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, it's interesting, the culture, and I think, Katie, everybody, absolutely. I know, well, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think that imposter syndrome is very common and very prevalent, right? No, I've had the same, Pam, it's interesting because culturally, I think, yeah, most girls are growing up, or back, myself growing up, you weren't, yeah, if somebody would to talk about their accomplishment or achievements, it was seen as bragging or whatnot. But I think there's a couple of things. Look, the fact that there is, social media that's grown up, LinkedIn, what else are you going to say if you don't say what it is you're doing, what you've achieved? So that's kind of helped maybe recast it in people's minds that it's not so much about bragging, it's about informing and sharing what you've done, because there are other people out there who might be working in those same lanes, and it can be helpful for them to see, oh, so-and-so's got that expertise. I'd love to reach out and pick their brain or tap in, to that and whatnot. And also that, we're learning from some of these tools as well. I think I agree with everybody that said here, it's the prioritizing, it's having the confidence, it's having the value and knowing your value and what you bring to the table. It's knowing that you're not always going to have the, all the answers. As Katie said, there are going to be times where you quote unquote fail, but there's always something to be learned and, and applied, from that experience. I'm also struck by, I know that there were some studies that talked about how, I just remember there were some studies that talked about how, if you looked at a job application, and if it's, a man who looks at the job application says there's 10 things and I know 3 of them, it's like, great, I'm going to put my, hat in the ring, versus a woman will look at it and say, of those 10 things, oh, I don't do 3 of those, so maybe I'm not the right fit. So it's a little bit of cultural that people need to just sort of, realize for themselves and break out of that mode, themselves. But I think at the end of the day, it really is a matter of like, you always put your best foot forward, do what you can do. You know what you know what you don't know, look to others to learn from, and don't hesitate to share what, your achievements and your accomplishments and your goals are, because as a manager, look, we're all reviewing people every year. It's helpful for me to, hear like, oh, wait a minute, I've seen that person was able to do this or do that. Wonderful. Here's a new opportunity I want to give to them. So recast it in your mind's eye that it's not about bragging. It's about sharing what you've done so that others can learn from or know. And at the same point, it can open up then opportunities for you, but also opportunities then for your managers to know, oh, they've tackled that, they've done this. Hey, wait a minute, then actually I've got a project coming up that they might be a good fit for.
I smiled when you said the male versus female on the resume, looking at job announcement thing, because everybody on this call who has ever taken a class with me in the Master of Sports Leadership program has heard that. I harp on it big time, because one of the problems I found with women, and even back when I worked in college athletics and was hiring women, is they eliminate themselves from the jobs because they don't apply for them, because they eliminate themselves when they look at the things and they don't realize that those 10 things are the, nirvana person that the people are hoping to get. But if they get somebody with half those things, you might be a finalist. It just depends on who's in the candidate pool. And guys don't do that. They're like C1, and I'm like, yeah, I'm good.
Well, it's ironic because I'm a co-founder for the New York Metro chapter of WISE, Women in Sports and Events. And that was one of our big things. It's a networking, group for women in the sports industry. We've cited that a number of times. And the irony is, when I heard of the role that I currently have at the Women's Sports Foundation, I looked at the job description, and there was one area that was like, I don't feel as strong as that. And it was hilarious to just all of a sudden realize, like, holy cow, I'm doing the very thing that I know exists out there, and I'm telling everybody else, oh, don't fall victim to it. And here I was doing it. So it can be a tough one to break.
Yeah. I would say to everybody also on this call, if you ever have an opportunity to have a resume professionally done for you, do it. Because I can tell you, I was unemployed for a stretch many years ago, and somebody recommended that to me, and I had my resume professionally done. And when they sent it back to me, I was like, I kind of want to meet this person. This is pretty impressive. I never would have come up with a resume like that, but everything on it, I was like, this is me. I handed it to my brother, and he's like, that's what I've been trying to tell you. So we definitely sell ourselves short all the time. So Caitlin is asking, she is a student studying psychology and planning on going into sports psychology, currently working in sports condition testing. I'm going to hit this to Kate. What do you think is the best way to make connections, get your foot in the door with professional athletic teams?
Yeah, I'd say it's very difficult. I always say network is the biggest thing, but also if someone doesn't respond, it's okay. You have to keep doing it. Like, I'm sure a lot of panelists here, you get so many LinkedIn requests or messages, you can't respond to every single one. So if someone doesn't respond, it's okay to try again, reach out to someone else. So don't feel bad if someone doesn't. Sometimes it's just schedules get crazy. So I would say LinkedIn, network. Also just have information calls. I've seen a lot of those it's not technically asking for a job, but like, hey, I want to learn about this industry. You can send your resumes around. I know what we do is I have a folder of resumes that people just send. And once I do hire for a position, that's the first group I look at, is that pile. So it doesn't hurt to send resumes along. I also say, I know medical is a little bit different because it is a very defined field. For hockey specifically, I know people want to get into the front office. It's not always that easy. Jobs aren't posted, it's word of mouth. So a lot of times there may be other positions that you can get into. So it may be tickets, sales, marketing, communications, partnerships. So sometimes it's just getting into sports in general, because once you're in a company, and I think that's anywhere, if a position becomes open, it'll be like, oh, this girl's amazing in marketing, she wants to get in, I'd vouch for her. And then it's someone you personally know giving a one up. So I'd say just getting in. I'd also say I hear a lot of, how do I get into the NHL? I think the NHL is awesome. Obviously I work in it, but there's also the AHL, there's college sports, ECHL specifically for hockey. Like, there's all different ways to get into sports. You could my sister works at Reebok, which is sports. It's not just the leagues. So I'd say also be open to different areas of sports, not just the one that everyone kind of looks to, because there are ways where if we are hiring, it may be, okay, I know these 2 to 3 college hockey coaches. Let me reach out to see if they have anyone. So there's different pipelines to get into it now. Thank you.
And
I would just say, and I completely agree with everything that Kate says from a team perspective. The other thing I'll add, to the degree you can and to the best of your ability, try to be a student, within that space. For example, sports psychology. Google is your best resource to learn what other teams are doing domestically, internationally. I think a lot of what sports in general, whether it's on the business or the team operations side, they're challenged to be innovative in the space. How are they how are the Devils better than the Rangers? How are the Nets better than the Knicks? And teams really just pull from each other, best practices locally, internationally, what's the newest technology. So to the degree that you can educate yourself by doing your own research, I think going into a networking conversation, it just gives you that much more ability to try to stand out because you are doing your research and you're getting ahead of it as much as you can.
I just wanted to add one point too, all great points that Kate and Annabelle and whatever it is that people are looking for. Never underestimate the value of an informational, just to reach out, and LinkedIn is a great source. Like literally I've done before at different points in my career where I was interested in an area and I've reached out to someone on LinkedIn to say, can I just grab 15 minutes on a phone? I'm exploring something and wanted to bounce some things off of you, and look, at the end of the day, everybody's busy. So don't take it personal if people don't get back to you, but you've got nothing to lose to reach out. And Annabelle brings out an excellent point on do your research first, ahead of time, so you can have a really good conversation. And as Kate said, that's such a good point that there are just so many ancillary, like so many tentacles. You may target this, but be open to looking at all the different things and exploring what are all the different things, because maybe there's another way that you can come in.
And don't be intimidated based on the job title that somebody holds. If their background or whatever is something you're interested in, go for it. They were where you are at one point in their life. And I've yet to meet somebody who does not like talking about themselves. So reach out, ask them how they got where they got, and you never know where it will hold. I can tell you I'm working at Northeastern because that's exactly what I did. I reached out to somebody and then, it ended up being 3-4 years later, I got a job offer. It does happen. It really does happen. So Katie, you talked about being the only woman in the room. Here's a question from Sean asking, how can men effectively support their female colleagues and champion them both internally and externally, with emphasis on men functioning as advocates rather than trying to be a male savior?
Great question. I would probably easily just say equity in all forms, right? Whatever that means to you is my number one thing. Another big thing for me is don't just offer the seat at the table when there's an empty chair. Always have one reserved. And that was a big deal for me in another job that I had, in that I was allowed to sit at the big boys table when there was an empty chair, but my name wasn't on one always, right? So I think that it's, sorry, I just got lost in my train of thought there as it relates to the overall question of just, it's better for men in the long run to have women, because we're coming in at a completely different mindset to problem solving, to handling the issues. We're women, we're mothers, we're wives, we're daughters, we just have a different lens on all things we're looking at. And what I have found, and I think I even learned about it in one of my Northeastern business classes, was the detriment of groupthink. And that is just so, and you see it all the time when it is the good old boys club, as I've known it in sports, and when it is the men in the room making these decisions, that then pretty soon, the domino effect of those decisions, if somebody had said to them, hey guys, what if we think about it this way? Or what if we do it this way? So as it relates to like not being the savior for women, it's giving women the chance and not seeing them as we just said about the resumes, right? A man and a woman. And I can't tell you how many times, when I got this job in tennis and people said, oh, do you play tennis? And I said, no, but I never played baseball either. So why should that matter, right? And you only know what you can know. I think Kate's a great representation of that, right? She's on the hockey ops side in a world that is very dominated, and Kim Ning in Major League Baseball is the only female in baseball on the operations side. But I can't tell you, and I'm a little biased because my husband also works in baseball still, but there's many, many, many successful men in these roles that have not ever played the sport either. So it's learned, it's achieved, it's taught, it's why should that be any different for women? So for me, it's give women a chance and don't just see us as a gender first and foremost, because that to me is probably the biggest barrier that women still face in sports, is that they don't know what they're talking about. Now, meanwhile, before all these people joined the call, what were we talking about? We were talking about an NFL game, right? You were talking about the Dolphins and the play, like probably what the boys were talking about too. So a perfect example of that anything should be available to all women, and just to continue to open doors for women and give them a real chance.
And also, you make an excellent point on what we talked about earlier of how we eliminate ourselves. And I'm sure there's a number of women who have said, oh, I can't apply for that because I never played baseball, you know, or I never played whatever, or I didn't, you know, I know I've had students in the Master's Sports Leadership Program, and they're like, well, I don't know if I should be, women, I don't know if I should be here because I didn't play sports in college. I played in high school, but I didn't play in college. And I was like, you want event management in sports? You don't need to have played the sport. So I think, you know, it's not eliminating us as well. Mary asked a great question, perfect segue. She's found in her career that men bring men along with them into their companies and support each other in opening doors. Do you find more women doing this for other women now? I think women who have experience playing team sports understand the tight bond and supporting each other. Hoping it'll change how women bring women along with them when they break through the glass ceiling. And I'll throw that out to anybody who.
I'd love to take this one actually. And Katie,
Okay.
kind of like what you were saying, just going off, and I wanted to interrupt. Greg Popovich is one of the best all-time basketball coaches, never played professionally. Same with Brad, who was the Celtics coach before, never played professionally. But when I'm around a table and I look and I see Marty Brodeur and I'm like, oh, he's a hockey Hall of Famer. Who am I? I never played. And I'm like, okay, well, I have a master's degree. Like, I shouldn't discredit myself just because I didn't play, and something I've had to learn along the way. Not to digress, going to Mary's question, I actually, and I'll give Women's Sports Foundation a shout out here in Patty's group. I have found recently men are helping. Scott Pioli, who's on the board of the Women's Sports Foundation, I actually met, I was fortunate enough to go to Patriots camp for a day, and he was someone I've never met and talked to, and he was like, hey, I know you've had certain struggles recently in this new career through talking with you. I'd love to connect you with so-and-so. And I'm like, okay. And that was it. And he just made the connection. He was like, women don't network as much as men. Men, it's always, hey, I've got this guy or I've got this position. And he has introduced me to two to three different people just to help me. He's not asking for anything in return. And that's something where I'm like, okay, he is a veteran in his career and he can do that. I've also, Megan Duggan is another one, hockey all-star from Massachusetts. She now works with us for the Devils. When there's a woman who will say your name in front of a room full of opportunities, as the quote says, it's really impactful. And so her and I have worked a lot, that she has mentioned my name in certain things. I've mentioned hers. And that's where it's like, okay, we help each other and it grows. So there may be opportunities for others to do that. And I think it is really impactful, but I have seen men kind of doing that a lot more. I think as even as when I'm at an away game, my general manager will be like, have you met Kate? And it's another general manager I haven't met. And there's the introduction. Oh, Kate does this and this. And then you get to know people through there. But I would say I have seen women doing it more. I think we need to continue to do it. I don't think women compete against each other. Like, I mean, some probably do. I don't want to generalize things, but not as much anymore, because I don't think it's just one seat at the table. Now there can be three. Before it was always like you felt like you were competing for that one spot. Now there's multiple women, different backgrounds, diverse. You didn't have to play. Like there isn't just one diverse candidate. So for me, I've seen that there are women that do speak your name, because you don't need to be the first to break the glass ceiling. As long as it's shattered, then everyone else can step through. So I think that's the biggest thing, and women all see that.
Anybody else want to have anything to add?
I'm just gonna say, building on Kate, that's all, it's so true and so excellent point. And actually now it's, I mean, it's just a really exciting time in sports in many industries, but certainly we see it in sports is, women are owners, they're coaches, they're GMs, they're, assistant GMs, they're presidents, they're CEOs. Like there are more and more women that are making their way up the ranks. And just by the nature of that, it's helping shift, some of that, old school thinking, like you were talking about earlier, Katie. So by the nature of that, these women are having experiences in their professional career and experiences, then they're working with other more diverse people. And just by the nature of that, you hire who you know, right? Or you start there in your network. I think that's natural that, can help that. And I think the other part too, that's a little bit as well as the shift in the culture, and maybe part of it is my own bias. I just know in my own career, it's always so easy for me to get lost in the day-to-day. There's just so much to be done and there's so much to be accomplished. Everybody's workday is busy no matter what your role is. And it can be hard to challenge yourself and tell yourself it's okay to, bring yourself up out of the swirl of that and make the time for that phone call, make the time to go for that coffee, make the time to go to that event, to nurture your relationships and to nurture, your network. And Scott Pioli is awesome. Is a great example of, just thinking and connecting. I would say as well, be mindful that you can be that person for someone else, as well as someone else can be that person for you. So anytime that, that you're at an event or whatnot, just be, when you're meeting and chatting with people, just be a natural brainstormer. Just be thinking, who do I know in my network or whatnot, or to give an idea or share an idea or a connection, because it's just only natural that then the other person will think like, wow, that was really cool. Oh, well, how can I do that for the next person? Or how can I do that in reciprocal? And it just becomes, so on and goes out from there.
The ripple effect. I think that going back to having your resume professionally done, if you get a chance to, that's a perfect example of that, because we don't realize how much we know sometimes because we're so into doing the job. And we just keep doing. And then if we take a chance to sit down and think about it, or we have somebody who wants to ask us about our careers and pick our brain a little bit, and they're amazed, and we're like, oh, why you're amazed? I'm just doing, no, they don't know this. They have not been there. And I think sometimes, like Annabelle, you said, I'm 15 years in, so I look at things differently. And if you take a second to sit back and go, what do I know now that I didn't know then? That's what they don't know. And that's why those of you who are trying to move up in the industry or get into the industry, you just ask people, you just network, you don't ask for a job, you ask for advice, you ask for insights. How did you get here? And you're going to end up with a job at some point. Speaking of which, I want to make sure anybody who might be interested, or if you know somebody else who might be interested, Kate Benoit made a post that she's currently looking to hire a sports clinician at American University and left her email address there. So I wanted to make sure that's in the chat. I wanted to make sure people didn't miss that. And of course, let's not forget that we were saying this before the call started, that the women's hockey team has their first home game tonight. Go Huskies. To switch it a little bit, and what are some things when you guys are hiring? All of you have looked at tons of resumes and at different points in your career. What are some red flags? What are some things that you're like, this is going to be a turnoff, or this is going to move that person from the yes pile to the either maybe or no pile, things that you want to avoid? Because we always hear what you should do. What are some things you shouldn't do? Annabelle, haven't heard from you in a little bit. So I'll pick on you.
No, that's a great question. I think probably the biggest red flag that I've seen is something that you can probably feel out pretty quickly, but if a prospective employee is interested because of the glamour or the access, or I get to watch games, it's definitely not what happens. It is a lot of work, a lot of behind the scenes work. So I think probably the biggest thing is in approaching any position, really understanding what the role is, again, to the best of your ability, and proving that your current skill sets is a true match for that position. Nothing to do with sort of the external factors of the so-called glamour of it. So that's the biggest thing. Sometimes there is this misconception of the access that it might be able to get you, or maybe if you're really just looking at the position so that it can get you somewhere else, probably that's not the most ideal place. I think it's really just trying to understand, what the open position is, what the opportunity is, and truly understanding how your skill sets match that, because that might not always be the case. So that's definitely the one of the biggest red flags, is truly understanding it's a job, and the excitement. Surely it comes. I mean, I love what I do. I wouldn't change it for the world, but it is truly a job before the glamour.
I could kind of go off what Annabelle said a little bit, agreeing completely with it. Is sometimes it's I ask a question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I think it's good to be ambitious and eager, but when someone responds, the general manager, I'm like, okay. So I think it's also a self-awareness thing. When people always focus on what's next and not on the current job, it's like, okay, well, I'm down to help grow and develop you, and that I want you to become a general manager, but let's not put a time limit on it. Let's focus on the current job, not just the shiny spotlight job of head coach or general manager. So for me, sometimes when people are focused on what they could be versus doing the current job, as Annabelle said, is one of the biggest things. Because I don't want to end up doing their job. That's why we're hiring. So sometimes making sure they understand what the position needs and that they're a good fit. I think culturally too, a good fit, how they communicate. Red flags are after an interview, if there's a follow-up, hey, or an informational, can you send me your resume? And then they never send it. It's like, well, I'm not going to follow up with you. So how excited are you for this? So I think sometimes those steps leading into it as well.
So along that same line with resumes and everything, Connor is asking, when you're looking at resumes and hiring people recently out of college, do you care if they majored in something related to the role? He's a fifth-year major in cell and molecular biology and recently decided to make the switch to the sports industry and have been finding it a little difficult. I'm going to start with you, Kate, since you were an accounting major.
Yeah, I have a master's in accounting and a minor in French.
My hardest class in college, I'll have you know. The
Yes.
hardest C I ever earned.
Same. I should have known then. It wasn't a good thing. I switched and now I'm in hockey ops. So no, you don't need to do it. I'm big on EQ over IQ, that you're coachable and you have the high EQ. And what you do, to me, it doesn't matter. If you have those soft skills, I think they're even more important. So long story short, no, it doesn't. No, if you're great, if all candidates are equal and someone has that extra hockey knowledge, where if it's a scouting position or a coaching position where you need those certain skill sets, then yes, it is an edge up, but not for a majority of the roles anymore.
So what are, to dovetail on that real quick, and then I'll let somebody else answer as well. And it's actually, they corrected themselves. It's Catherine who's doing it. using her boss's computer. But what are some of those soft skills, and what are things that people should highlight? I mean, clearly, if you have work experience or you have transferable skills, highlight those. But I know I've seen some cover letters where people have said, start out, especially women, start out by saying, I know I don't have the right major, which I know you don't want to do. So how would you recommend promoting yourself when you're coming from a completely different major?
Yeah, how I started was the I'll do anything attitude, because slowly that grows. So yes, you're making copies, but you do 10, you do it on time. Then they're like, hey, okay, do you actually want to sit in this meeting and take notes? You do notes well, they're organized. And then it's, hey, okay, do you want to continue? That was really helpful. And then you're giving opinions because you're in the meetings and you're forming things. So I think don't the small things add up. Like once you get people trust you, they're going to continue to give you more. It's whatever the quotes are, like the worst thing is that you get more work for doing a good job because people keep giving you things. For me, those soft skills, transferable skills are, we say here to our players, be a good person, be on time. Everything follows under that. If you're not on time right off the bat, you're kind of starting with disrespect in our eyes, that you're not respecting all of our times. And be a good person, that's just carries through. Being professional is being a good person. Asking questions is being a good teammate, being a good person. So kind of everything falls under that for us as we do here in the hockey world. But some of those: communication, time management, professionalism, team first attitude.
I just wanted to add on to Kate. It's a really good question that the person brings up, because similar to Kate, my bachelor's is in finance. So then I used the master's to kind of transition more towards the creative fields of marketing and communications. But don't underestimate, like I would say for Catherine, like take a look at some of the skill sets that you learn through molecular biology. Like what is the skill underlying, whether or not it comes back to the things like Annabelle or Katie were saying, like, didn't matter that I didn't play baseball. I had these skills. So you can kind of take a look at it like it doesn't matter, like whatever your field of study was, what were the things that you learned, the projects that you did, and look to like own up or illuminate what are the skills around it, because that's transferable no matter what. And I would say also too, which is good that, Michelle said that like still time for intern and gain experience. Not every internship is months or semesters or half year. Stop and take a look at your network or people that you know and just ask like, hey, can I shadow you for a week? Hey, is there a project? Can I volunteer on something? Put some of those things together. And then that's something that you can put on your profile and on your resume to say that I've, been a volunteer here or intern here, or project work in the field includes this, this, and this. Also take a look at like, what are some of the associations out there that maybe you can join? So you can at least put on your profile that you are a member of. Like for me, I was like, okay, I'm a member of WISE, Women in Sports and Events. I was a member there before even transitioning fully into the sports space, because I knew that's where I wanted to migrate towards. So you've got the, don't hesitate, don't get stuck in a lane, just be creative and think creatively.
And always remember that 70 to 80% of the people don't work in what their bachelor's is in. If you're in engineering or your medical field, yeah, sure, you're going to, but a lot of other people don't. And one of the things I've heard a lot lately is never forget, we spend more time with the thoughts in our own head than anybody else in the world. We don't spend as much time with the thoughts in our head as we do with our spouse, our friends, our dog, anybody. And unfortunately, because human nature is human nature, a lot of those thoughts are negative. And the approach is, oh, I majored in this, therefore I can't do this, as opposed to I majored in this, so I bring so much more and a fresh outside of the box thinking to this position. So I think it's changing that narrative of how we do it. And with that, looking at the time and all that, I'd like to just go straight down with all the panelists and see give us your last words of wisdom or parting thoughts that you would give to everybody. And I'm going to quickly start out by saying you can definitely, to everybody who attended, thank you so much. And you can connect with anybody, fellow people who attended via LinkedIn. My big suggestion when you do that, if you can include a message. Don't just bop on everybody's name to connect. Leave a message and say, I enjoyed your speech, whatever it is. Have some kind of connection. Christine, your baby was so well behaved throughout this whole thing. I will never forget that. But what are some words of wisdom or parting thoughts? And we'll start with Annabelle.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks again to the panelists. It's great to meet, and to everybody participating. I guess just maybe piggybacking off the last conversation, I was a communications major, and I had no idea what I wanted to do, and so ended up working for a team. But I did work at the NBA for 9 years in a very corporate setting, 9 to 5, ivory tower of Midtown Manhattan. And within a week of learning about a position in team operations with the Atlanta Hawks, I accepted. So that just goes to show that going back to, major, minor, it's not that it doesn't matter, because it does, but at the NBA, I really learned a lot and I felt a well-rounded business person to make it attractive for that next position. So really just focus on trying to be as well-rounded as possible. In addition to all of the networking opportunities, but just being, a sponge and absorb all you can and as well-rounded as possible, and you'll end up where you're meant to be.
Katie.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback too on what Kate said, the hustle and the grit and the drive, and just to do anything and to be on time and to do that. Now that's going to get you there, but it's not going to get you here, right? So you have to understand that I spend less time in my days on Excel spreadsheets and all these things, and I probably spend 90% of my day on human aspects of the job. And so if I had one thing to say, is just remain teachable, that you don't know everything, even though you're really good at your job, you still don't know everything. I don't know everything. Remain teachable, understand the importance of emotional intelligence, because you can also be a rock star on the field and a cancer in the clubhouse. And guess what's going to get you fired? It's the toxic personality and all the outside traits that you're bringing to the team. And so that's kind of my last speech, and I'm very happy to be here with you all and happy to connect on LinkedIn. So thank you very much for putting this together, Michelle.
Thank you. Kate.
I would say probably be an advocate for yourself and also treat people how you want to be treated. I think sometimes we all get wrapped up in things going on, but how you speak to people matters. How you communicate, sometimes even just being cognizant, trying not to send emails too late, putting them in your draft. So I'd say just be cognizant, be a good person, be an advocate for yourself. Really, no one's, like you said, no one's thinking about yourself more than you. So you might think it's a big deal to sit in a meeting, or I have a doctor's appointment, can I come in late? You're like, I don't want to overstep. Just ask. The worst they can say is no. So just advocate for yourself.
Perfect. And Patty.
Terrific. Oh my goodness, hard acts to follow. It's been great being on the panel with you all, and also appreciate Michelle, you putting it together, and Pam, great job with the conversation, and everybody who participated, some great questions. I agree with everything that everybody said, so I'm trying to think of something different, but I just remember, I've said a couple of times to people who are certainly starting out their careers is, the career track is not a racetrack. Take the time to, learn, to be a constant student, to figure things out, to look for those opportunities, speak up for the things that you're doing as well, but also think creatively, like get a foot in the door, what door wherever that may be, and then be open to meeting people, chatting with them within the organization or entity to see what other opportunities, but also be taking yourself up out and look around you. So if you're in one area because that was the best place you could start, but you're interested in another, then take a look at, are there professional associations, networking groups in that other field? Who are the writers, or who are the people that are, sharing interesting articles or things in that field? And, do your networking just to pick their brain and whatnot. But just know the career track is long. There's a lot of different, and there's going to be pivots, there's going to be changes, and there are ones that you're going to bring about, and there are going to be ones where circumstance will bring about for you. So, have faith, don't lose heart, nurture your networks and your experiences and whatnot. And, don't hesitate to just explore, try your hand at a few things.
Awesome. I just want to take a quick time to thank all the panelists and thank everybody for showing up, and hand it off to Michelle.
Thank you, Annabelle, Katie, Kate, and Patty. These are great insights. I feel like we could take, of course, another hour or two together, but we covered so much. And Pam, thank you for your excellent moderation and facilitation. We covered so much ground, and great questions from the participants as well. And again, thank you for sharing what you've learned. You each brought unique perspectives and insights, and overall great advice. And for those attending, just remember your Northeastern Network is here for you on LinkedIn, on NUSource. For those figuring out career things, as students and recent grads, there's a career design office. And then I also do provide some career guidance to alums that are 7 years or more out, and follow the advice of this panel. So thank you all to the panelists and for attending.
Yeah, and if you want to go for a master's degree, there's always the Master of Sports Leadership.
There you go.
Excellent.
You can see me again.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
Thanks so
you
much for
all.
the opportunity. Take care, everybody. Go Huskies.